Okay. All right.
Good.
Good.
Okay, yeah, Jeff. So we just started, and you said it's beautiful out there in Alabama.
Yeah, it is. Sun's out today, and let's see, 76 in the garage, so not too bad.
That's nice. It's actually sunny today in the Pacific Northwest as well. And for anyone who's new to listening to this, you and I did a Lynchpin member interview. I looked it up this morning. It was about a year ago,
Yeah,
and it was episode 374. So if anybody wants to check that out, and this is probably like going to be episode 550 something, 60 something. So it's been a bit since then, but uh last time we talked, I remember thinking about Alabama being one of the few states I haven't got to. Does it just have to get incredibly muggy and humid in the summer?
it really does. And it's a challenge being a garage gym person. Yeah, it makes you mentally stronger. I mean, I think I've taken pictures of. I have my little thermometer right here. I think I've taken pictures where it's deep into the 90s. And I'm
Mm.
out here doing stuff. So um, modulating intensity takes on a completely different flavor. There's a little bit of safety
Yeah,
involved there.
right.
Um,
So we wanted to chat today because you recently did a HYROX race and you posted about it in
yeah,
the private Facebook group, and it's super cool. And HYROX at the moment, man. Say what you will, whether you like it or hate it, but it is all the rage. It's super popular. You see it everywhere. There's a lot of CrossFitters dipping their toe in the water, and people are, I don't know why. It's so funny. It almost seems like it's like a polarizing thing. Like there's two camps. People like love it or they see it as
yeah,
this threat and it's bad and you shouldn't do it. And it's very interesting to see what happens. Human beings are interesting creatures. But to me, it looks like a pretty fun thing to go do. And so you actually did it. So I just want to get your take on it because I'm sure that people are going to want to dip their toe in the water. So maybe for
for
people
sure.
who don't know, um, what is a high rocks race? How would you describe it? If you had a friend and you're like, what'd you do this weekend, Jeff? You're like, I did a high rocks race. Like, what is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and I think I had to do that a few times this week. So I think I called it a fitness race,
Okay.
and I think that's fair. To call it a fitness race. Um, it is it is a large amount of running.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great. For people with a running background that maybe want to get into doing some other things besides running. You see the stations, and so I guess to go back there, it's um, there's 8 runs of 1,000 meters each, and then
Okay.
in between, each of those runs is a station, a fitness station, and the first one is a ski erg. So a lot of us are familiar with that. The second and the third are a sled push and a sled pull.
Okay.
Then the fourth one is burpee broad jumps.
Okay.
The fifth one is rowing. The sixth one is farmer carries. The seventh one is sandbag lunges, and then the eighth and last station is wall balls. So you
Okay.
finish all 16 of those things, and then you're finished. So you know,
So you've got to do 8 different stations worth of work
right.
and 8 1,000 meter runs, so 8 kilometers of running. And so for the people in the US, what does an 8K come out to? Like 5 miles?
Yes, just about 5 miles.
Okay, about 5 miles of
And
running.
this is all done inside like in an arena setting. And so the running happens around, you have to run in and out, and then there's sort of transition areas that they call the rocks zone. And that ends up getting you another sneaky like 0.7 kilometers before you're done, which I figured
Okay.
out. So it's eight runs, but then you got some other running in there. So it's a pretty running heavy event.
Okay. And for some general stats on you, how long have you been doing Linchpin?
So Lynchpin, I first joined, I think, January of 2018.
And how
Um,
old are you right now?
47 right now. So I was thinking about that this morning that I've trusted you with my fitness for pretty much my entire
For better or
decade of
for
the
worse?
40s. No, for better. It's been great, but yeah, it's a pretty cool thing.
And what made Hyrox capture your attention and want to dip your toe in the water?
I think I saw it on YouTube first, so a video floated by, of this race. And I was like, that looks pretty cool. it's a sport. They've standardized it. They've got championships and Elite 15, I think is what they call it. And so I watched highlights and watched people doing it, and just looked like something. You know, what the last words of the CrossFit in 100 words is, right? Try new sports.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw that as one that there's a lot of crossover
Yeah.
with CrossFit as a methodology, but it is a new sport. And so that got me really interested in it.
And, to be fair, you are one of those wonderful people who likes running.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that plays well to you also. And, somebody wants to learn more about that, they can go back and listen to the other interview we did with you, number 374. From the time that you saw the HYROX on social media or whatever it was, how far away in the future was the date that you were going to go? And then did you modify or change anything for that upcoming event?
Yeah, it's probably been a year to a year and a half since I first saw it.
Oh, okay.
And then I couldn't work up the travel and all that stuff to go to like a Chicago, New York, Dallas, Toronto. So yeah, I live in Birmingham. So I was hoping for an Atlanta race to be released, and this was the inaugural Atlanta race, and so that
Ah,
was
okay.
that was announced right around Thanksgiving, and so we signed up, and sort of the early entry, um, first set of entries. I jumped in, and in terms of training, I kind of made a point to not do a lot of specific training. I really just wanted to see, doing, CrossFit, Lynchpin's
Mm-hmm.
methodology, how would I stack up? Now, I have some, adaptation from running that I think will probably never go away. So
Yep.
that's always going to be there. But I'd say 90% of the fitness house or more, is built on Lynchpin. And I was just going to ride with that.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I had no idea what the answer to that was going to be because,
Yeah.
depending upon the athlete, like I am of the opinion that if you've been consistent in training for several years, not to say that you'd crush it. I mean, because to crush
Right.
it, that's a different deal. But could you show up and do it? I think the answer is yes. Your
Yeah.
run pace might vary, but the answer is yes. It may suck and it's going to be a grind. It is what it
Yeah.
is. It's a long deal. Let's let's walk through, I guess, before we even start the race, your just general interpretation of, you sign up, you show up, the registration, the check-in, organized, disorganized, looking around at the crowd, you probably know what CrossFitters look like. Did this just look like a bunch of CrossFitters? Like, what was that? What's everything up to 3, 2, 1, go?
Yeah. The race was awesome. It was really well organized. I think they did a really good job. They've got, all the crowd management parts of it down. All of the workings of inside the race itself were fantastic. I walked in. It was in the Georgia World Conference Center. So if you would imagine, like, it's probably the same place where they have like the indoor monster truck rally or something. It's just like a huge convention floor.
Okay.
Um, the outside of that convention floor is the running track, and then the inside is where they have the stations, and then they've got sort of a fan zone. Um, they sell merchandise and have other things sort of on the inside of it. They've got a bag check. They've got a warm up area. So when I got there, I made sure that I had eaten something, and changed into my workout gear. You got ready for all that, and then checked my bag, which that went great. And then when it was time, I think 30 minutes or less before my heat was supposed to start, I went into the warm up area. And the warm up area, they had everything, which was great for me because I don't have a sled here at the
Mm-hmm.
house. And I did train a little bit with a sled, but it's not the exact sled that they have. And so I was able to push their sled, with their weight on their surface, and pull
Okay.
their
Yeah, because the
sled.
surface matters.
It does. It's like this. It's not astroturf, yeah, it's carpety, kind of
Okay.
surface.
Okay.
Um, and then on the sled pull, the rope, that was actually, I was by far the worst thing for me in the race. But part of that is because I wasn't familiar with the rope and how
Mm-hmm.
long it was, because I guess we'll get into that. But it's a 12 and a half meter pull, And so
Okay.
there's some physics there with pulling it from far away.
Yes.
It's pretty difficult. And then the rope has some stretch and some nylon to it. So I've got a rogue rope, that's just rope, the burlap, kind of rip your
Mhm.
hand, rogue rope. Um,
Yeah, some
and
ropes
this,
are static, some are dynamic.
yeah, and this one's not nylon-y and kind of stretchy. This is better for the hands, but worse for the actual getting that
Gosh,
sled
okay.
to move. So I did get to warm up with everything. They had the sandbags and the kettlebells and all that stuff. So I was able to get familiar with um, the handles and everything that I needed to kind of get started.
It seems like they're super popular. I mean, was it just jammed with like hundreds and hundreds of people, or what was it like?
Yeah. So they have a lot of spectators. A lot of people will have their family come. Um, and also like if they're doing there's different times for different waves of the event. So the men's open division is the division that I was in. It started at 8 a.m., which was an early ride over from Birmingham. My heat went off at 10:30 a.m., so it was a little bit better. But then I think they had singles, doubles, pro division, open division, and then relay that went like into the night. Like I think they were still releasing heats at 7, 8
Oh,
o'clock at
wow.
night.
Did
So
you
yeah.
do you have to hang out there? Like, for example, did you know that you were going to go at 10:30 a.m. or did you show up at 8 a.m. thinking that you were going to go at 8 a.m.?
No, so they it's a Saturday race, and so we got an email on Wednesday.
Okay.
And they updated the start times on Wednesday, so you knew on Wednesday exactly what your start time was going to be. And
Okay.
so
And do you have to get there a
yeah,
certain amount of time beforehand to check in or as long
yeah,
as
yeah, you could check in 90 minutes ahead of time.
Okay.
So I just planned to get there at 9 for my 10:30 start. Of course, with parking and walking to the thing, it ended up being more like 60 to 75 minutes, but I still felt like I had plenty of time.
Did you do this? I think you said we earlier did it. Did you do it with somebody or were you solo?
Yeah, yeah. Originally, my wife was signed up, and she had she's a musician, so she had a music gig that came up, and so she wasn't able to make it. So,
Okay.
yeah, we kind of put
How
her ticket.
convenient.
Yeah, I know. we,
What did she play for an instrument?
so she's a drummer and also plays flute, and so this play that she was in, she played flute in their orchestra. Yeah,
Oh, those seem like two extreme opposite instruments.
yeah, they really are. She's multi-talented. And she
Yeah, no kidding.
can
Okay, that's
play a
cool.
lot of different stuff.
That's cool. So you show up there. What's the vibe? Like are you people cool and making friends and like telling war stories, or is everyone nervously staying in their corners? Like, what's it like?
I saw both. Yeah, I talked to one guy who, he was sort of like asking me what the weights were, and questions. I'm a little bit of a preparation person, so I watched videos. I was like, okay, I got to make sure and do everything in the right order. I didn't want to get any penalties.
Okay, yeah.
Like I want to be like totally like integrity and virtuosity of movement. Like I don't want to go outside the, kind of a rule follower in that way. And he was sort of like, "How long do we run?" I'm like, "Where have you
He's
been?"
amazing.
But
He's just showing up.
yeah. So, but there was both. There were really friendly people, people who have done a bunch of them before, and then a lot of people who it was their first time. And
Okay.
then there were probably, I want to say it was like 50 to 70 of us that started in that one wave.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty decent sized group of us that went off it, and it was right at 10:30. They were running right on time. It was clockwork.
If I forget, try to help me remember. I'd love to learn about, are you just doing the movements? Is there standards? Is there range of motion? Is there a judge? Is there such a thing as a no rep? So let's make sure I don't forget that.
Yeah.
Um, but with that, okay, so you go, you're warmed up, you kick off right on time. There's 50 to 70 people. Is your heat going on while a different heat is like in the midst or something? I guess I'm curious, like, is it a bit of a gaggle? Do you know where you are in
Mhm.
the midst of it? Or like
Yeah.
is it one lap is exactly 1,000? What's that kind of deal?
Yeah. So the laps were not exact, and they give you instructions that week of. And our instructions are pretty simple, for my brain, which are they have like an arch, one of these arches that you run under. And
Okay.
so there's an in and there's an out. And
Okay.
so what they would tell you is that the second time that you run past the in, you always go in it
Okay,
time.
so you're gonna go through the in
Um,
twice. Okay,
yeah, so
gotcha.
you pass the in, and then the second time you go in.
Okay,
And so that actually caused the first run, just because of the logistics of this arena and where they put the start line, the start chute, that made the first run shorter. Because when you come out
excellent.
of that chute, you could already see the in arch kind of around the corner. And so you passed it around once and then you go in. So you that first run you can kind of go because it was not as long as the other ones. But then you sort of made up that those meters, later in the other runs because you're having to run, a little extra distance to get to stuff.
And
Um,
is it like the start of the Boston Marathon where you're elbowing people, or do you get some room there that you're 50 to 70 people kicking off?
Yeah, the 50 to 70 were fine. It
Okay,
was, because there's constantly people on the track running, that have started earlier.
I
And
see.
so weaving my way in and out of them, that was a little bit tough. But they do put this white line sort of to in the middle to the left, and there's sort of a fast lane and a slow lane.
Gotcha.
And so it's set up so that, and what I did is I just ran like right next to the line, on the
Hmm.
slow side. And then whenever I needed to pass somebody, I just sort of cut, which it's helpful. You're cutting inside, to pass them, not outside.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I used the fast lane just for passing.
Okay.
And
And did
yeah,
you, for these 1,000 meter repeats that obviously have this other work in there, and so that fatigue will add up and compound, were you just going to go by feel, or did you have a pace in your head of what you wanted to do?
I had very little goals. I guess along the same lines as, that I just I didn't do a lot of specific training.
Hmm.
Really my goal was to finish. And so I really looked at it as I'm going to carry this entire thing with a moderate intensity. And so for my
Just feel it
runs,
out.
yeah, my runs, I wanted to be able, if I wanted to have a conversation, I could have had a conversation, or maybe it was just fast enough, that conversation would be, periodic and not and not constant. So
My gut says if I was to do that, that would actually be how I'd try to play it too. Just
yeah,
slightly uncomfortable.
yeah. Well, and there's some workouts that you go into them and you're like, I'm gonna do this workout with a moderate intensity, right? And then you get to
Hmm.
the end of it and you're like, that is high intensity. Moderate
Yes,
intensity
100%.
is high
100%.
intensity for this workout.
Round five doesn't always feel like round one.
That's
Yep. Or
right.
in this case, run eight. So, okay.
Yeah.
So that's cool to know about the slow lane and the fast lane too. I didn't know that. That makes a lot of sense. So you kick it off and maybe we go station by station as to
Yeah, absolutely.
how it goes. So you do your first 1,000-ish, and the first thing is you go to the ski erg, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this is a good time to throw in, like, there was, huge concern on my part, watching other people and their experiences about going to the wrong thing, or, going
Oh,
out of order, or doing something wrong in terms of just the mechanics of the race. So basically, you go in that in arch, and then each station has an arch. And so there's 8 arches.
okay. So there's one like mega area with all
Yeah,
the in between run things. Okay,
that's right.
got you.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a huge hallway, and then they would have water. They had water, and it wasn't Gatorade, it's something aid, but yeah. So the first half of it was in order. So from like left to right, it was one, two, three, four, and then the right hand, the second half of it was not exactly in order, and it was just logistics. So I think you had wall balls in the middle because that's where the finish area was, and so that was
I
eight
see.
was directly in the middle, and then it was like 5, 7, 6.
So
You know,
did you have to have the order memorized, or was there like a big placard when you would run in as to what, each with the order of the stations?
yeah. Thankfully, the big arches had the numbers on
Good.
them,
Okay,
so it
great.
would be like, yeah, 6. Farmers carry.
Yep.
Now, I did do I didn't do much specific training, but I did sort of a simulation here at the house. Maybe 2 weeks before, I did sort of half, and then I
Okay.
changed up some of the movements where I didn't have a sled. But I did that out of order, and I got I got to the end, and I'm like, boy, this is really foreshadowing, I hope. But I did fine.
So, do you have a ski erg in your garage?
I did. I bought a ski erg. I was able to get a used ski erg
Okay.
probably 3 months ago.
Okay.
And so I've got a ski erg with the stand. I love it. I'm just not very good at it yet. So not
And
very
so, how would
well
that first
adapted.
station go?
I was not going to just to hurt myself there. Um,
Neither would I.
and so, to be honest, I think I probably kept about a 2:15 pace for my 1,000.
Nice. Yep.
The guys on either side of me were like long gone, and I was fine with it.
Let
I'm
him
like,
go.
yeah, I was letting people go at that point. I knew ski erg was not my strongest implement. We'll practice this thing, but it's different. It's much different from the rower. Even though it's the same company,
Mm-hmm.
same flywheel. I just haven't quite gotten there with the transference of my energy. It just becomes like this
Sure.
arm, destroyer. So I kind of knew that was a weakness, and I wanted to minimize it.
So you finish the ski erg, you take off on the next run, and then station number two is what's station two?
Yep, sled push.
Ah, okay. All
Yeah.
right. The dreaded sled.
Yeah, the push was great, actually.
Good.
I had a strategy. The strategy was not to, um, so the sled push and the sled pull, you make 4 trips and they're 12.5 meters each. So it's like a down and back twice.
Okay.
So,
But it's
that's
going to be
four.
50 meters total.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's 4 pushes. And I wanted to not do 4 pushes. So I wanted to do 8. And so I found, they had some pink tape, kind of on the ground, and I think that's about halfway. So I would just push the sled to halfway, and then it's a lot like one of our for time or not options, where I'm just doing sort of that strength, segment, like strict pull ups or something, where I'll count to
Hmm.
10, and then I'm right back to the bar. I sort of use that same methodology. I think I've heard you talk about that before, where I take a break, count no more than about 10, and then I'm back on the sled, push it the rest of the way.
And do you have a sense of, I guess, do you know how much the sled weighs?
Oh yeah,
Is it like three something?
yeah, yeah, in pounds. Now, of course, they do a lot of. They're very all the equipment's metric. So
Sure,
I wanted.
sure.
I think it's two. No, not 220. I think it's 100. I'm going to say the wrong thing.
No worries,
Um,
but I was going to
yeah,
say, I think I read that it was somewhere around that neighborhood.
I think
But
it's 152 kilograms. I think that's the number for
but
the
I was going to
push.
say, getting to what we said earlier, that same amount of loading, while not insignificant, it it's of monstrous importance what the friction level with the push is. Because you can push a
Yeah,
300 that's not too bad, or you can push a 300 that feels like a cement truck.
yeah.
So what was your sense in it? Was it a lot of people could do a steady push, or did they engineer it in your mind that this was supposed to be a miserable stop-start sort of a station?
Yeah, I had an anxiety and a fear that it was going to be, by far the worst of that. And I would just have to quit.
Come to a
Like I can't,
grinding halt.
yeah, I can't push this sled at all. So it was tough, but I would say it was about the same as pushing on concrete.
Okay,
Because I had practiced pushing on concrete. And I read that even the humidity in the building on that day can affect it.
sure.
But to me, I was able, it was not a problem to make those 8 pushes,
Okay, good. Okay.
take those breaks. And so, um, yeah, I
And
felt really
that'll juice
good.
up the legs for the next run.
It really did. Yeah. And I'm glad I took the breaks because, I think really like if you try to go all out, and push those, all the way across and go really fast, you're probably going to have this lactic acid explosion that, uh, doesn't translate well, when you try to do your next run.
Well, and it makes sense, like you said, you're there for fun, you're feeling it out.
Yeah.
You don't wanna crash and burn. You're just having a good time. You're pushing yourself appropriately. You're making decisions as the input changes to your body. So
Mm,
it makes perfect sense. So you take off on the next run. You're weaving in and out of one lane to the other lane.
yeah.
Then you come back in for station three, and now you've got to not push the sled. You got to pull it with that beautiful stretchy rope.
Yeah. Um, so this is the only time I, kind of interacted with the judges. So,
Oh yeah, the
um,
judges. Right. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So, this was the one that I worried probably the most about, because I had not practiced with a longer rope, and I knew that that was going to present a different stimulus. Um, and so, sure enough,
So
and when you pull,
you're standing static and it's a hand over hand pull back to yourself.
yeah, there's a
Gotcha.
couple of different ways, that I read to do it. I think the hand over hand, people will say like that burns your, arms and your shoulders, a lot faster. And so what you see a lot of people do is they kind of lean back, kind of static, lean back like a deadlift and just walk it back.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know if you had to like stay in a small box with your
you
feet.
do.
You
Yeah,
do.
and,
Okay.
and yeah, and that presents a problem. So I don't know if it's 6 feet, maybe it's a little longer than 6 feet. It's about 5 steps that you can take.
I
Um,
see. Okay.
And so I started that way. I stepped on the line. The judge warned me,
How dare you?
don't step on the line again. And so then, as you do start to get it closer, um, the rope starts to bunch up. And so then you've got to worry about, getting the rope out of your way. Um, yeah, I
Is
think
it
I
just
got.
one long pull? The sled is 50 meters away from you?
No, it's also the four
Ah,
by 12.5 meters. And so what they
okay.
do is the sled has a rope connected to it on both sides. And so you
Oh,
pull it
gotcha.
out and you pull it over the line and then you run down to the other end and you pull
Gotcha.
it back with the other rope
Okay, that
and you
makes
do that
sense.
twice.
Okay, that
So
makes sense.
it was a bit of a
So,
disaster.
but what were your lessons learned? If somebody is fired up to try a HYROX, they don't have access to a sled and they're
Yeah.
hearing this. What, in your estimation, for you, did you land on? Was it feet static, just pulling with the arms? Was it a bit of walking back? What would be your recommendation?
Yeah, and so I'm not super, super strong. Into my deadlift, I think 327, I think is my one rep max deadlift. And I'm a
Mhm.
smaller athlete, so I'm sitting at probably 155, 156. And so um, I think for me, this may not be the same for a larger athlete, but I think I would use some of the hand over hand. Um,
Gotcha. Okay.
I think maybe a combination of that. So the first thing I would say is pull all the slack out of the rope. I
Get it
made that
tight.
mistake of like grabbing the rope, and then just kind of, yanking, and the
Mm,
slack wasn't out of it, and I ended up on the ground. I
gotcha. Okay.
fell, and embarrassed myself, turned red. But pull all the slack out of the rope, and then I think I would do, this walk back, and then before you get to the line, whether it's 4 or 5 steps, then I would do,
I
a
see.
couple of hand
Yep.
to hand. Then I would set the rope down, take the time to move that slack rope, off the back so that you're not
Hmm.
tripping over it. Walk forward, grab the rope, and then just do that same thing, and do it consistently. And I think I would have been a lot better off, but that was the one place where I think, the mental part of it got the best of me, because I had messed up and gotten a warning and tripped and fell. And the next thing I knew, I was, sort of in zombie, la la land. Like, what am I even doing?
So there
Because
are judges watching.
there are, yeah.
And you got a warning. Do you get multiple warnings? Do enough warnings eventually lead to something else, or what's that all about?
Yeah. So I think it's warning first, and then you would get a penalty. And I think they can
Oh,
assess
I
that.
see.
It's different at different stations, but they could put time on. Um, I can't remember exactly what it is at each
Gotcha.
station. I
Okay.
think it varies a little bit, but they can put time on. So when I got the warning, I was like, I really don't want to. I would
Right.
rather go slower than have a penalty. This
Yes.
is this is how my brain works. So
So even though that was the station that had you filled with dread, you did it, mission
did
accomplished.
it.
You take off on the next run, and uh, now you're at station four, 80 meters of burpee broad jumps.
Yeah, brutal.
Brutal.
It's
Yeah.
it's as brutal as you, and I'm pretty good at burpees, and I felt like that was going to be a sweet spot for me. Um, and when I looked, like I went back and looked at metrics later, and it was a pretty good station for me. But I can tell you that how I
But it
felt
hurt.
was like a truck was repeatedly
Hmm.
running over me. It hurt.
Do you
Um,
have a sense of how many burpees you wound up doing to cover 80 meters?
yeah, there, I think I probably did, maybe 45 to
Okay.
50, it feels like. And
Okay.
I see people when I watch videos, I see people really maximizing the length of their broad jump. And to me, I was like, I don't know if I want to do that because,
I've been wondering that same thing as to what would be the sweet spot.
yeah. And so I'm still not totally sure about that. I did not try to maximize my broad jump. I thought that, being a smaller athlete, I could just get to the ground and back up, more, and more quickly, and that I would burn myself up quicker by, trying to maximize the length of my broad jump. I'm still not sure if that was the right strategy or not, but
Have you seen, and what was the judge's eye during this? Because, God bless the algorithm on social
sure.
media. But it's puts like some HYROX stuff in my like YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels feed and whatnot of people trying to find a way to like in the burpee broad jump station almost do like a hidden walking lunge to get a little bit of extra distance. Then they do a burpee, then they kind of step into a lunge. Did you experience
Yeah.
something like that? Did you play with something like that?
I tried to keep my blinders on in terms of watching what other people were doing, because I thought that would just, kind of make me mad.
Right.
I come from a background that, like, with your programming, and just how I learned to do CrossFit, that, like, the idea of virtuosity of movement, like, really matters to me, and I feel like you're cheating yourself if you're not doing the reps right. So for me, I looked at the standard, and they have standards for for all the events,
Okay.
and the standard really was, don't, you can't take that extra hitch step. The feet have to come, behind the hands. You can't throw yourself like totally forward.
It's
When you
like,
do
you
the
know
burp.
what we're saying, people, with the burpee broad jump. So
Yeah,
just do the burpee broad jump.
yeah. And I did I tried to step them all up to save a little bit of energy, even though I have the capability to
Smart
kind of
call.
jump them. Yeah, jump them up.
So
So
that's legal, so to speak.
yeah, the step up is legal as long as the feet are coming back behind the hands,
Okay.
in the general vicinity of where your previous one had ended.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, and there are judges following you, so nobody bothered me during the burpees, so I think I did those great. I did
When
get
you
the
say
one
judges
warning.
following you, are the judges just hanging out in the area, or is there like a one athlete to judge ratio?
There were probably times it was 1-to-1, and then there were other times that it was more like zone coverage where,
Gotcha. Okay.
there were a couple of judges for maybe like 5 athletes, and they were just sort of keeping an eye on everybody.
Okay, so the burpee broad jumps, you're kind of halfway through the event now. Runs
Yeah,
starting at some distance is starting to accumulate. You've pulled, you've pushed a sled, you've been on a skier, so you're not fresh. So those burpee broad jumps, they had an impact. You felt them. And
yeah,
now
they were tough. They were
and
really
now you
tough.
take off winded with heavy legs for the next
Yeah,
run. And then you cruise into station five, your friend and mine, 1,000 meters on the rower,
yeah, and
which
I
was
love the,
everybody who's a smaller athlete loves the rower.
and
No,
that's
no, they
me,
don't.
uh, and that's me. But there was a mental challenge for me with station 3 and 4 for sure. That was the hardest part of the race. Spoiler, it was the hardest part of the race. And so
Hmm.
when I got to the row, when I got to station 5, there was a real sense of,
You're
I,
familiar with it.
yeah, and I'm going downhill. Um, but those that were 2 hard stations and then 2 runs on really heavy legs after that.
And
Why
the
don't we
row is miserable, but
cruise?
hey, you get to sit down.
Exactly. And so yeah, I think I kept a pace of about 210,
Oh, I think
um,
that's solid that far
which
into the
is,
row. To be honest with you, you said you weigh what?
yeah, 155.
Man, that far into the race, hold it. I think that's excellent, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I've had a rower here, I mean, obviously doing CrossFit for a lot of years, and
Hmm.
that was actually the first thing I bought. When we started to move to a garage gym, was the rower. I think it was the first thing that we ever had. So, spent a lot of time on this rower, and I compared to the ski erg, I definitely feel it. Like I know how to transfer my weight,
Right.
and get good pulls, and
You've got
not,
thousands and thousands of reps on it.
yeah.
So
So I was
you
thankful that the rower came when it did, when it did.
you hop off the rower, you got another run that you knock out, and now you move on to station six, which you said is 200 meters of farmer's carries, which I'm
Yeah,
fascinated about this. A, what was the weight? What was the implement? And then 200 meters, that's a good distance. That's no
yeah, it
joke.
is. Yeah, and sometimes even before I really got into, preparing for this event, like I would take your accessory work, of farmers carries, and I would actually turn that into a 200 for time. If you
Nice.
had a
Okay.
three by whatever, I would say, well, I'm just
Okay.
going to see how fast I can do 200. So it was 24 kilograms, so 53-pound bells. Um,
Okay. A pair of 53-pound bells.
yeah,
Okay.
and the
Is
the,
there
the
chalk?
handle, there is, there is chalk. I don't remember it, but
I'd
I
probably
know,
have some sweaty hands by then. That'd be miserable.
yeah, and it was not too bad. And they had, these bells. I've got more of the, like the Rogue kind of cast iron
Yeah.
um, bells, and these handles were stainless steel is the wrong way to say it, but it's
Oh
more of like
no. They like
um,
slick a little?
they were a little slick, but I guess it was helpful that they were a little thinner,
Okay.
maybe than the
Okay.
cast iron.
Gotcha.
So I slippage wasn't the issue.
Okay.
I just think my wrist got tired.
Gotcha.
And I diverted from my plan here because I was gonna jog with those bells because I'm like, I can, I don't think I'm gonna hurt myself that bad by just basically running this
Mm-hmm.
200 meters with the bells. And then I'll get it done a lot faster and I'll be under tension a lot less. And so my
Sure.
grip and then, I saw some other guys, out in front of me and they were walking with the bells and they looked bigger and stronger than me. And so I sort of changed on the fly. I was like, maybe, it's deep into the race and I'm tired. Maybe I'll just walk with these bells. And um, it did end up causing me to put them down a couple of times. So I guess my advice would be, if you practice and you feel like you have the capacity to just trot with those two bells, then just, get it over with because that saves your grip. The faster you go, the more grip you save. And it
Okay.
may cost you a little bit on the next run, but I don't think it would cost you a ton.
And are you doing a whole bunch of back? Is it 50 down, 50 back, 50 down, 50
Yeah.
back? Okay.
Yeah,
Are
there's
you
it's loops and so yeah, you go up and back and then up and back and then out.
are you one of the are you sipping on a little Powerade, having a little water, or are you just not doing anything until the whole race is over for some you said there's like
Yeah,
refreshments out there.
I felt like I needed to hydrate. So there was water, like water tables. And that was an interesting one because I run half marathons and marathons, and so there's this whole idea of like you grab a water from the table, and then you just run with it and you drink, and then there's someone to sweep it up. You just pitch it on the street. I didn't really see anybody doing that, and you're always in the same place. And so I really did like stop at the table, grab the water, make sure I drank the whole thing, and then put it in the corresponding, trash
Gotcha.
receptacle. And so when I went and looked at my, metrics, it's like, well, you spent about an average amount of time in the transition area, or maybe a little bit higher, just slightly higher than normal. Uh, and so I don't know if I would do that any differently, but it does like that time in the transition area, if you're concerned about your time can also add up. But
Yeah.
yeah, especially later in the race, the heart rate was really high for a really long period of time. And I went in hydrated, but I didn't want to come out, really way dehydrated. So
Sure, yeah. And so I mean that was station six. You get two left, so you're 75% done
yeah,
with the race. I mean, so you've got a lot of probably fatigue is starting to come in, the
sure.
legs are jelly, the lungs are on fire, you make your way to station number seven, 100 meters of sandbag lunges. I'm curious as to, do you know what the weight on that bag was? Because 100 meters, depending upon I mean, 100 meters of just
Yeah,
with no weight, will go ahead and make the legs nice and toasty. So 100 meters with a load, that's spicy.
yeah. And it was 20 kilograms, so 45 pounds.
Okay,
Um,
that seems appropriate.
this is one of those places where for a very long time I've got a sandbag here that I think I have 65 pounds in the sandbag. And I will lunge, even before, thoughts of high rocks, I will lunge with that 65 pound sandbag. And so that was one of those where mentally I came in saying that's going to be a light lunge.
But it's second
Um,
to last.
it is second to last, but I was counting on that thing not feeling very
Okay.
heavy. Um,
And
and
in reality, how did it feel?
there was a guy I talked to right before the race that had done a bunch of them, and I was like, "What's the worst station for you?" And he said, "Sandbag lunge, 100% every time, no question. Sandbag lunge is the worst." I would not say that. I would say for me, the burpee broad jumps was the
Okay.
worst. And the sandbag lunges, I did not race that lunge. I came to a full sort of standing, hips open position each time. There's this little stutter step that people will take.
Hmm.
And I took that for most of the time. And it was really more about I just didn't want to get into, you see a lot of people that they never open their hips, and they're kind of crashed forward and they're just sort of doing this duck walk, with
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
bag. And again, I wanted to go at a consistent pace with, integrity and, virtuosity of movement. And um, so that's it. And I did pass some people. I think maybe, one person, passed me on that part, but, um,
It was a
I
good
felt like,
station for you.
yeah, I felt like it was. I looked and I think my advanced metrics that I looked at would show you that all my runs were above average and all my stations were basically below average, except for the wall balls and the burpee broad jumps were basically average.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
but I felt good about the sandbag lunges. Now my glutes, felt those later. That was like the first soreness I felt was from the lunges.
I
Um,
see. Okay.
yeah,
And then you've got one more run
right.
into good old station number 8. You can see glory, which is the 100 wall balls. Personally, this would be one of my nightmare stations
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I hate wall balls.
Yeah.
I get bad shoulders. They always hurt my neck. And this at the end of the race would be, I would just have, for me personally, be like, oh, come on. But, this is your race. How did it go for you heading into station number 8?
Yeah, we're pretty similar in that. I don't like wall balls. It's one of the places with, like, historic CrossFit RXs where I'm like, you shouldn't make, short, thin athletes throw a 20-pound ball to a 10-foot target.
Right,
We're
right.
we are not the same. We're not built the same.
Unfair.
Yeah. Now in the garage, I don't have a 10-foot target. It's probably 8.5 to 9 feet, where whatever, the highest point I can throw to.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do wall ball workouts, like if I do Karen, in the garage, it's going to be 20-pound ball, as high as I can throw it. So there was a little bit of, it's a 14-pound ball. It's a 6 kilogram ball for the open division.
Oh,
And sort
okay.
of
I didn't
like,
know that.
yeah, and sort of like the lunge, I was like, okay, that's going to help me because I never trained with a 14-pound ball. I'm like, I'm just going to train with what I always train with, and
Yeah.
then it'll just be lighter on race day, and that'll be great. It's still pretty heavy. It felt
Oh,
heavy
sure.
after all that stuff. And a funny thing I put in my race report was I did have trouble finding a rhythm at a couple of points because I was throwing the ball too high because it was lighter.
Is
You
it
know,
a 10-foot target?
yeah, it's 10 foot, yeah, 10 and 9.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. They've got, I don't think they have this at all the events, but they've got a pressure sensor on the target.
Huh.
And so you've got a screen in front of you that tells you how many reps you've done. Um,
Oh, nice.
and then, so I had a judge behind me. This is, when you watch the YouTube shorts or whatever, I think the wall balls is where you see the worst. And that's caused a lot of that polarization that you talk about, because you get on there and it's like there's people just throwing it to the target, or basically doing push presses. And so, yeah, I think you probably saw my pictures. I was wearing my Lynchpin squat
Yes,
shirt.
yes.
And I was going to make sure that it was 100, deep, solid, good squats and wall balls. And so I did them in sets of 10. And,
I would
at
not have
that
done more
point,
than that myself.
I was an hour and a half in, and I was like, okay, I'm, sets of 10, with quick breaks, and then the finish line is right here, and I'm going to be, you know, meeting my goal. The time is something I'm going to be happy with. So I wasn't going to, try to rip off 50 or anything like that. I don't think it would have worked anyway.
Right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, I had a judge right behind me, kept hearing him say, good set, good set. And so that was encouraging, and got to 100, and then I was finished. You're done.
Good for you, man. You came in, I wrote down, you came in at 1:30, yeah, 1 hour, 34 minutes and 14 seconds.
Yeah.
Really cool. And how did you feel either later that day or the next day? Like, were you wrecked? Were you an appropriate
Yeah.
level of sore? Did it depend on the body part?
Yeah. I think I'd call it appropriate level of sore, actually. I was back to training on Monday.
Nice.
Um, Although my legs were tired on Monday, and I think I've been a little bit more tired, probably all week, but it wasn't anything, completely, bruising or destructive to the body. I mean, imagine you probably no worse than Murph, or if you do Chad 1000,
Mm-hmm.
kind
A
of what you feel
long
in your,
grinder.
yeah, and the heart rate. I went and looked back at that, and in my average, I'm 47 years old, so probably, maybe 180 is probably my max, 178, 180, and I average 165.
Oh, you're
Um,
up there.
yeah, for the entire thing, and that was what I felt like was a moderate pace. So I get
Yes,
that's one of the
exactly.
reasons I was
Yes.
like, a moderate is hard. So, um, but overall, I think from a technical standpoint, you know, pull the sled a little better, and then a couple of other things. I probably could have gotten, closer to 130 in terms of my time, but for my fitness level, anything other than that, I think I would have to do some sport specific training. Um,
Gotcha.
and it took a couple of days to think about that. I was like, I don't know that I actually want to. I think if I could just show up, year after year, and put in a time in that
Mm.
event that was, pretty similar to that, and the experience and how I felt was pretty similar, like I would be perfectly fine with that. So
Yeah, that was going to be my question is now having one under your belt, are you one and done or do you have a hankering to do something else?
I think I'd like to do it again. Um, I think I'd like to do probably try a uh, doubles one, either, maybe with someone from the community at some point, or with
That'd
my
be
wife.
cool.
Yeah, I think it'd be really great. And then I would like to do, I think I would just show up and do the same thing again, to be honest. There's just a really enjoyable way for a fitness enthusiast to spend a Saturday morning.
And I
Um,
see your shirt, you got some swag.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they were going to sell you many, many things, sweatshirts and um, shoes and watches. They had everything there that you might want or need, to support your HYROX habit.
That's cool, man. Well, I really, I guess any maybe final question is for people that maybe have sparked their interest in it, any just advice or now that you have one under your belt, something that you wish you'd known?
Um, think I would just encourage people, especially it's going to be mostly Lynchpin members that are watching this, that you can crush a lot of stuff. I mean, you say it, in a lot of your podcasts and Ask Me Anything, but uh, you could really do some great things, some awesome things on planet Earth, just by doing Lynchpin. And so I would say stick with that program. Um, you know, do the stuff that's good for your knees and good for your back.
Right.
Deadlift, um, heavy days. I thought about this, but man, what a blessing it's been this week for me to have that 165 heart rate, for an hour and a half straight on
Mm,
Saturday. To not have to do that every day in my training. So you talk about modulating intensity, whether, like there's modulating heart rate or perceived rate of, exertion as
hmm
well, right? So on a deadlift day or on snatch day, like today, um, you're going hard, you're going near your 1 rep max, but from a rate of perceived exertion or from your heart rate, you may only average 100, right? And that your body needs that. So yeah, I would say if you really are interested in doing this, just be consistent with your training. Um, do run day for sure if you're going to do this thing. When you program the 45-minute bike this week, I ran that.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah. You choose the
I'll
run
be
option.
Yeah, I'll be out there for 6x400. 6x400 translates very well to this event. And then, find it, if there's a gym in your town that has a sled, if any of the implements that you don't have, there are two gyms in my city that are actually sort of HYROX affiliated.
Hmm.
So, these are like either, CrossFit affiliates that have taken on HYROX as an additional option, or they've just sort of branded HYROX.
Right.
And I think they may have those sleds and ropes. I think it's good to touch those things ahead of time,
Sure.
um, and just be ready to have fun. I did a little bit of the analytical analysis and stuff like that after the race, but everything leading up to it was just let's go do this thing and have fun. Doing a different sport.
That's cool, man. Well, Geoff, as always, it was good to talk to you again, and I appreciate you just giving a good detailed breakdown of that first Hyrox experience. I think people are gonna, um, you know, you might spark an interest and give them some useful information. So much appreciated, my friend, and
We'll have ourselves a linchpin meetup next
that would
time.
be so cool. I mean, again, they're in all the major cities, so I'm sure if any, Lynchpin member is going to do one in whatever is the local arena, there's probably someone in the area that could, drive there and meet you, which would be awesome. So, yeah, brother,
Absolutely.
thank you so much, man. I will see you online.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.